She fell hard. Her walker skidded across the pavement. The man who pushed her? Wearing a supermarket security uniform, gray hair, stone face, caught on camera. 12 seconds. That's all it took to set the internet on fire. His name surfaced fast. George Miller, 68, 7 years on the job. And now, fired, shamed, public enemy. The video, short, sharp, and everywhere, played on every screen. No background, no explanation, no second chances. He didn't give a statement, didn't explain, didn't even deny it. The supermarket responded within hours. We do not condone violence. George Miller has been removed from duty. His name disappeared from the employee wall. His photo was quietly taken down. The man who greeted everyone by name was now a ghost in the break room. Co-workers kept their heads low. One new hire, Ethan, hesitated. He wanted to say something.
I'm not sure we really saw.
But the manager cut him off.
It's over, Ethan. The whole world saw the video. Don't make it worse.
And so, George walked out the back exit, alone. But weeks later, in a quiet courtroom at the edge of town, someone else walked in. And when they spoke, the whole room and the story changed forever. George Miller was 68 years old. He moved slowly, but not like someone weak, more like someone deliberate. Every step measured, every gesture careful, like a man who had learned long ago not to waste motion. His uniform, always clean. His posture, always straight. Hair silver gray, buzzed short like he never let go of the discipline drilled into him decades ago. For the last 7 years, George worked the night shift at Riverbend Market, a mid-sized grocery store tucked between a gas station and a laundromat off Route 14. He clocked in 5 minutes early, clocked out 5 minutes late. Never missed a shift. Never called in sick. Never once filed a complaint or received one. He wasn't the kind of employee who told jokes in the break room. He didn't talk sports or complain about management, but he nodded at everyone, greeted them by name. Morning, Carla. Evening, Mike. Need help with that, Maria? He noticed when someone came in with red eyes from crying. He'd restock the water bottles in the break fridge before anyone asked. He'd mop up spilled coffee, even if it wasn't his job. No one asked him to clean the parking lot after windstorms, but he did it anyway, quietly, before the sun came up. He had a habit of wiping down the door handles at the start of each shift. No one knew why. Some said it was just an old man's quirk, but he kept doing it, long after the pandemic ended, long after anyone noticed. And yet, despite all that, most people couldn't recall his name when the video surfaced. He was always just the security guy, someone said in a news interview. That's what he had become. A fixture, background, familiar, but invisible. What they didn't know, what almost no one knew, was that George Miller hadn't always been invisible. Once, years ago, George wore a different uniform, a patch on his shoulder, a red cross on his chest. He served 2 tours as a combat medic in Afghanistan. And he was good. Very good. Too good, some would later argue. In one village siege near Kunduz, his unit came under mortar fire. 2 men were hit, one in the chest, the other losing consciousness fast. The radio was dead. The medevac route was blocked. Protocol said wait for extraction. George didn't. He pulled both soldiers out under fire, stabilized them behind a tractor, and commandeered a civilian truck to drive them to a nearby outpost. They lived. But he broke chain of command. He was reprimanded, demoted, and eventually retired early. The commendations never came. Only a letter of administrative closure and a quiet suggestion to disappear. And so he did. George moved to a small town that didn't ask questions, took a quiet job, that didn't require explanations, and started building a life out of silence. He didn't tell his story, didn't post about his service, didn't ask to be thanked. He folded his past like an old uniform, packed away in a box no one saw. The only trace left was the way he moved, the way he scanned a room, the way he reacted just a fraction faster when someone dropped a glass or stumbled. To most people, he was just an old man in a cheap badge and scuffed boots. Someone who didn't talk much. Someone who never caused trouble. Someone easily forgotten. Until, suddenly, he wasn't. The days that followed were brutal, not in noise, but in quiet. Outside the supermarket, local news vans staked out the parking lot. Reporters leaned against tripods with forced concern etched on their faces. Microphones pointed at strangers, asking the same question. Did you see the incident? Do you feel safe shopping here? Some customers crossed their arms and nodded solemnly. Others gave sound bites that would later air between ads. He looked normal, but you just never know. I saw him once. He always seemed off. Inside, the tension thickened. Employees walked past each other with eyes cast downward, as if hoping not to be asked where they stood. No one wore their name tags that week. No one laughed in the break room. The manager, a woman named Denise, tried to keep things moving. She spoke in clipped, neutral tones, using words like unfortunate and investigation. But even she couldn't hide the weight in her shoulders when George returned quietly one morning to clear out his locker. No one greeted him, not even a nod. He moved through the back hallway like a ghost. His locker had been cleaned already. His belongings placed in a small cardboard box on the floor. A thermos, a spare belt, a small first aid kit he always carried, even off duty. As he reached down to pick it up, a young cashier, someone who had once shared gum with him on slow nights, turned the corner. She froze, then quickly turned, around, and walked the other way. He didn't blame her. In the manager's office, Denise sat behind her desk, her hands clasped tightly in front of her. She didn't offer a chair. "I'm sorry this is how it's happening, George," she said softly. "I've seen the clip. I don't believe that's all there is. But the company, well, you know how it is. Liability, optics." He said nothing. "We had to release a statement," she continued. "We had to act fast. You understand, right?" George gave a slow nod. She hesitated. "Do you want to make a public comment? Maybe help people understand your side?" He looked at her, his eyes steady. "No," he said. "I have nothing to say." She opened her mouth as if to push again, then stopped. There was nothing else to be said. He walked out the back exit, his usual route. But this time, no one held the door. Back at home, his apartment felt colder than usual. The air smelled faintly of dust and black coffee. It was a simple space, one room, one lamp, one recliner by the window. A bookshelf filled mostly with worn paperbacks and a few dog-eared field manuals. On the wall, two framed photos, one of a younger George in uniform, smiling beside two other soldiers, the other, a black and white snapshot of a woman holding a baby. He hadn't watched the clip until now. It was everywhere, sent to his phone, emailed by strangers, linked in comment threads with words like coward and abuser. He sat down in the recliner, clicked play, and watched. 12 seconds. The woman stumbles. He moves toward her. Contact. They fall. Cut. The angle was bad. The timing worse. It looked damning. George didn't flinch, didn't rewind, didn't close the tab. He just sat there, hands folded on his lap, eyes fixed on the darkened screen after the video ended. Then, slowly, he reached toward the photo on the shelf, the one of her holding their son. His fingers brushed the glass. She would have known. She would have believed. He didn't look angry, only tired. Outside, the world moved on, arguing over grocery prices and gas. Inside, the silence pressed in like a slow fog. He didn't answer his phone that week, didn't go out, didn't defend himself. He'd seen this before, in a different uniform, under different flags. People don't wait for facts. They believe the first thing that makes them feel certain. And George Miller had long since learned silence, for better or worse, was the only thing no one could twist. The courthouse was small, older than it looked on Google Maps. No marble pillars or polished floors, just beige walls, flickering fluorescents, and benches that creaked when you shifted your weight. George Miller arrived alone. No family, no reporters, no one from the store. He wore a plain gray button-down and dark slacks, the same clothes he used to wear under his security vest. His boots were polished. His posture, still straight, still precise. At the front desk, the clerk barely glanced up. Name? George Miller. She tapped a few keys. You've been assigned a public defender. He'll meet you inside. George nodded, then took a seat in the hallway outside Courtroom 2A. He didn't check his phone. He didn't rehearse any statements. He just sat still, hands folded, as if waiting for a train he already knew would be late. Inside, the judge, mid-50s, glasses low on her nose, read over the file without emotion. The prosecutor, young and self-assured, flipped through printed stills from the video. No one made eye contact with George. When the judge finally looked up and addressed him, her tone was procedural. Mr. Miller, do you understand the charges brought against you? He nodded. Yes, Your Honor. Do you wish to make a statement? George paused, then said evenly, I didn't do what they say I did, but I don't have anything to prove otherwise. The silence that followed was awkward, not dramatic, not shocking, just heavy. The judge glanced at the public defender, who shrugged slightly, clearly unprepared. We'll proceed with discovery, she said, tapping her gavel. Trial set for 2 weeks. George was escorted out, still quiet. A few days later, just past dusk, there was a knock on his apartment door. George opened it to find Ethan, the young man from the store, standing there with a brown paper bag. I brought dinner, Ethan mumbled. Didn't think you'd cook much these days. George stepped aside without a word, motioning him in. They sat at the small kitchen table, both men chewing slowly, plastic forks clinking softly against the takeout containers. The room buzzed faintly from the overhead light. For a while, neither said anything. Then Ethan cleared his throat. I was there, that day, he said quietly. Not close, but I saw you move toward her. I didn't think you pushed her, not like they're saying. George didn't look up. Ethan continued. I should have said something. At the store, or to the news. But I didn't. George finally spoke, voice low and steady. No one should have to choose between doing what's right and keeping their job. Ethan looked down. But if you do choose to speak, George added, don't do it for me. Don't do it to fix what people think. Do it because you can live with yourself after. Ethan nodded slowly, guilt sitting heavy on his shoulders. They finished eating in silence. Before leaving, Ethan stopped at the door. I don't know if it matters, he said, but for what it's worth, I never believed the video. George gave a small nod. That matters, he said quietly. More than you think. The courtroom was half full, mostly reporters and a few scattered locals curious enough to show up. The weather was gray, the mood matching. George sat at the defense table, still, hands folded, a chain of calm wrapped tight around him. The prosecutor stood with practiced confidence, remote in hand, screen behind him glowing blue. He looked at the jury, then at the judge. Your Honor, the central evidence remains unchanged. As the court will see, the defendant initiated contact. The rest is interpretation. He pressed play. The familiar footage appeared, same low angle, same shaky zoom, a figure in uniform stepping toward an elderly woman. Impact. Collapse. 12 seconds. He clicked pause at the exact moment George's arm brushed the woman's shoulder. Her walker slid. Her knees buckled. They went down. The prosecution rests its visual case, he said. Murmurs rippled across the room. The jury scribbled notes. The judge looked tired. George didn't flinch. Then a voice cut through the silence from the gallery. I have footage the court hasn't seen. All heads turned. A woman stood slowly, hands clenched tight around a small hard drive. Your Honor, she said, voice trembling, my name is Lisa Townsend. I'm the daughter of the woman in that video. I believe this changes everything. The judge blinked. Approach the bench. Lisa handed the drive to a clerk. The room held its breath. When the video loaded, the screen showed a higher angle, security footage from the store's mounted camera, clean and wide. Lisa explained, this was recorded by the front-facing camera over the entrance. I requested it after my mother woke up and told me what actually happened. The judge nodded. Proceed. Play. This time you saw the full scene. The elderly woman stepped forward, alone, walker rattling slightly. She paused halfway down the ramp, then suddenly swayed. Her knees gave out. From the side of the frame, George entered, fast, faster than a man his age should move. He reached for her, caught her elbow, but gravity was faster. They went down together. But unlike the viral clip, this one showed what happened next. George's body turned mid-fall. He pulled the woman toward his chest, wrapped one arm behind her head, the other across her back. He took the hit. His shoulders slammed the pavement. Her body landed against him, cushioned, head untouched. Then, without hesitation, George shifted her gently onto her side, checked her airway, pressed 2 fingers to her neck, and lifted a phone from his belt. He dialed, waited, spoke, then stayed, still as a statue, until help arrived. The room was silent. Lisa wiped a tear. My mother told me he saved her life, she said. She had a mini stroke. If she'd hit her head, the doctors said it could have killed her. She looked at the prosecutor. I asked the supermarket for this footage. They refused, citing privacy, so I hired a lawyer. We petitioned for access through the court. The judge stared at the screen, frozen on the frame of George shielding the woman's fall. Then another voice spoke. I need to say something. It was Ethan. He stood slowly from the gallery, hands shaking slightly. I work at the store, he began, glancing at George. I was there that day. I didn't see it all, but I saw how fast he moved, and I saw how people turned their backs on him before they even knew what happened. He swallowed. And this wasn't the first time. A few months ago, a customer collapsed at checkout. Seizure. People panicked. George, he didn't hesitate, got her on her side, cleared her airway, stayed with her till the ambulance came. Management didn't even mention it. Not even a thank you. His voice cracked. Because people don't remember the quiet stuff. The good stuff. They only remember when things go wrong. He looked at the jury, then down at the floor. I stayed quiet. And I shouldn't have. Silence. Then the judge leaned forward, her voice calm but firm. Prosecution, do you wish to respond? The young lawyer opened his mouth. then closed it. "No, Your Honor." The judge nodded slowly. "Court will recess briefly before ruling." She tapped her gavel. Everyone stood. George did too, slowly. Lisa walked over to him. "Thank you," she said simply. George nodded, eyes soft, no pride, just relief. Outside the courtroom, no one spoke to the press. Inside, for the first time since it all began, George was not alone. When court reconvened, the room was a different place. The air was still, like the kind right before a storm breaks, or after one has passed. The jury filed in slowly. Some avoided eye contact. One woman dabbed at the corner of her eye with a tissue. George Miller remained at the defense table, just as he had since the beginning. Back straight, hands folded, expression unreadable. The judge looked out over the courtroom, her gaze sweeping across every row before settling on George. She took a long breath, then spoke. "This court has reviewed the new evidence and heard testimony that casts serious doubt on the nature of the charges brought forward. In light of this, and in the interest of justice," she paused, "I hereby dismiss all charges against Mr. George Miller. He is cleared of all wrongdoing." She set down her gavel, not with force, but with something gentler, final, human. Then she added, her voice quieter, but no less steady. "Mr. Miller, I am sorry for what you've had to endure. This process failed you." George didn't speak. On the screen above him, the frame had frozen, still showing that moment where his body cradled the old woman, protecting her from the ground. He looked up at it. His eyes stayed there for a long time. No pride, no vindication, just release. A single tear traced a slow path down his cheek. He didn't wipe it away. From the gallery, Lisa stepped forward. She approached slowly, her hands clasped in front of her, eyes shining but steady. When she stopped in front of him, she bowed her head slightly. "Thank you," she said, "for saving my mother and for staying silent when everyone else was shouting." George looked at her, his face softening. He didn't answer. He didn't need to. Some things didn't require words. Some truths spoke loudest through silence. Behind them, the gallery remained still. No one clapped. No one cheered. But something had shifted. The silence that had once felt accusatory now felt reverent. Not the quiet of condemnation, but the quiet of respect. George nodded once to Lisa, then turned back toward the judge, gave the faintest of respectful gestures, and began gathering his things. As he did, Ethan stood from the back row. Their eyes met. Ethan gave a shaky smile. George offered him the smallest nod. It was enough. George walked toward the exit, not quickly, not triumphantly, just steadily, like a man ready to be forgotten again, but finally on his own terms. And this time, no one looked away. The letter arrived 3 days after the verdict. It came in a plain white envelope, with the Riverbend Market logo stamped in the corner. No apology, no grand gestures, just a single-page memo typed in corporate tone. "Mr. Miller, in light of recent developments and the resolution of your case, we would like to offer you the opportunity to resume your former position. Your dedication to the store and community has not gone unnoticed. Sincerely, Regional HR, Riverbend Grocers." George read it once, then folded it in half and slid it into a drawer with a quiet click. That night, another envelope arrived. No letterhead, just a single line, written in neat cursive. "For what it's worth, I believe you always did more than your job." No name, but the handwriting was unmistakably Denise's. He set it beside the unopened offer from corporate. Neither would be answered, but he read that line twice. That Sunday, a small feature appeared on the back page of the town's weekly paper. A black and white photo of George, mid-stride outside the courthouse. The headline read, "George Miller, the guard who needed no applause." The article didn't dramatize. It didn't praise with flowery words. It simply told the truth about the 12-second video, about the moment that followed, about a man who never asked to be defended, but deserved to be remembered. 2 weeks later, on a morning that smelled faintly of grass and early sunlight, Ethan spotted him at the park. George was sitting alone on a wooden bench, coffee in hand, watching ducks drift across the pond. Ethan approached slowly. He wasn't sure if George would welcome company, but George turned slightly as if he already knew. "Morning," Ethan said. George nodded. Ethan sat beside him. They watched the water in silence for a while. The air was still. Birds called out now and then, distant but clear. Then Ethan spoke. "I never knew you were a combat medic." George didn't respond right away. Then, "I wasn't supposed to be, just sort of became one." Ethan nodded. "The way you moved, in that video, it made sense after I saw everything, like your body already knew what to do." George gave the faintest smile, then took a sip of his coffee. "I only did what needed doing," he said quietly. "That's all." Ethan looked at him. "People know your name now, not just the old guard, not just the guy in the video." George didn't answer, but for the first time his shoulders seemed to sit a little higher. Not proud, just released. They sat in companionable silence a while longer. Eventually, George stood. The sun had risen higher now, casting long golden lines across the gravel path. He nodded once to Ethan, then walked away, steps even, head high, back straight. Not disappearing, not hiding, just walking. This time, no one looked through him. Some people live loud, others live true. They don't need applause, or cameras, or hashtags. They just show up, do what must be done, then disappear again, quiet as sunrise. George Miller never asked to be defended, never tried to clear his name, because men like him don't chase recognition. They carry it, silently. Sometimes it takes a 12-second mistake to remind us that silence doesn't mean guilt, that quiet doesn't mean invisible, and that if we slow down just long enough, we might finally see the people who've been holding us up all along.